Hello, my friends. Andrew Thomas Hackett here. I'm going to talk about the movie Before Sunrise. I also do a podcast. It's called the Trace Podcast. You can check it out on all the things, all the podcasting apps. But here, I'm just going to talk one movie, and that's what I'm going to do in general on this channel. And so this is the first one of these that I'm doing. I've done plenty of podcasting and radio and video kind of stuff, but this is no nonsense movie talk. Period. I got to say that we'll start this off today, literally within the last few hours. Word has come down that we have lost the beloved and the beautiful David Lynch. And I've recorded many podcasts about Lynch. I've written about him and talked about him endlessly. But just want to say he's one of the this person changed my life as an artistic person, as a spiritual person, and it's going to be a whole process of grieving the loss of this beautiful man. But we've got the movies, and I got the Twin Peaks up right there. So, anyways, David Lynch. But we are talking about the movie Before Sunrise by Richard Linklater from 1995. So I'm assuming that you've watched the movie if you're looking up a video about it, but maybe you haven't. You're just curious or something. And so just basically it's a very simple story. It's about two young people in their early 20s are on a train that's going to be going through Vienna and stopping in Vienna. One of them is an American, played by Ethan Hawke, and one is a French woman, played Julie Delpy. And they start talking, and they end up deciding he has to fly out early the next morning, and they decide to just like hang out in Vienna all night until he leaves. And it's a romantic film. It's a drama, but it's very funny and philosophical, and it's completely inspirational and glorious, and has become a part of this makes spoilers kind of like tricky because there's a trilogy. Okay, there's three of these films that are filmed like 9 years apart. So what the relationship will will be between these people is, I'm not going to spoil that because they could have gone in a million different directions with these. But this was not supposed to be a trilogy. It's just this idea of like when you're young, in your late teens, early 20s, and you're traveling and you meet someone special, and you experience an intense bonding in a short amount of time, and then maybe you never see them again. Or what if you did try and see them again, right? So it's a very, I would think, relatable movie. It certainly was to me when I saw it, which was, I'm a few years younger than, I'm probably like 5 years younger than Ethan Hawke, maybe a little bit, but he's not that much older than me. But he was young enough to where I certainly, let's see, 1995, I would have been, so he's probably 6, 7, 8 years older than me or something. Anyway, before this film, Linklater he was a very unlikely, he's had an unlikely career because he didn't come through the movie schools, the film schools, like so many people did of his age. He studied film the old school way. He watched 3 or 4 movies a day, every day, when he was in his early 20s, late teens, and helped start the Austin Film Society, if I remember correctly, and just started making films, just doing it, indie. This is the 80s when he was doing this, and this was the rise of indie filmmaking with Spike Lee and Jim Jarmusch and Susan Siedelman and Soderbergh, right? A bunch of these people. Al Hartley, I guess. But anyways, he makes a movie just with his friends called Slacker, and it's totally glorious. It doesn't even really have a plot. It just like follows a bunch of people around in Austin as they talk. And he likes talking in his movies. His movies are very dialogue forward, but they're so fun and insightful that it's never boring, his movies are still wonderfully cinematic, but he tends to be pretty dialogue forward. But when he combines that with something like the movie Waking Life, then you have the medium of cinema being radically expanded while still digging in real like core philosophical, religious, romantic questioning that I think that we all do. So he breaks out with Slacker, then a little bit, then he ends up making Dazed and Confused, which bizarrely did not do well in theaters, but became on video like, and now it's a modern classic. So got that right over there. Thank you, Criterion Collection. Anyway, so he does after Slacker, so he does Dazed and Confused, and then he makes this movie, Before Sunrise. And after this, he does a movie called Suburbia, which is good actually, and I recommend it. It's not to the level of those first few, but it's still quite good. And just to point out a few other movies that came out in 1995, probably the movie that's most talked about to this day is probably Heat, but also Todd Haynes' Safe, Julianne Moore, Casino, Scorsese's Casino, which if you haven't seen that one in a while, whew, it's power. It still hits. It hits hard. And Sharon Stone. Clueless came out this year. To Die For. Nicole Kidman is in yet another movie right now. Baby Girl. Haven't seen it yet, but looking forward to it. And then Tim Robbins, Susan Sarandon, Sean Penn, Dead Man Walking. So some pretty good movies. Not to mention, bunch of others, but those are some like the ones. That's not like my list of the best. It's just like some movies that definitely stick out. And so Before Sunrise, those movies, Before Sunrise is a different movie than any of those, because Before Sunrise is very simple and small and focused and humanistic and ultimately sweet. It is not a cynical movie. It's an earnest, sincere movie about young people that are trying to find a connection and exploring like the realities of when you're a young adult of like new freedom with the knowledge that this freedom is going to lead to choices, which is going to lead to responsibility and becoming an adult. Like that scares you when you're at that age, as it should. It still scares me now. But of course, life is about commitments and responsibility. But you can only have real responsibility if you have freedom. I saw this movie not in the theaters, but whenever it came out on video, and it immediately resonated with me. Like I wanted to be on a train in Europe and meet some beautiful person and talk about life and philosophy and meaning and what are we going to do with our lives? Like, yes. And I actually, because of the way I grew up, I've traveled a lot, including already as a teenager, I traveled a lot already by myself. And so this felt like a completely plausible situation to be in. So I thought the movie was great, loved it, totally tapped into all of my romantic longing as a 17-year-old or whatever. And but it wasn't like a movie that I mean, I really liked it, but I never thought of it as like one of my favorite movies or anything. It wasn't until the second one, Before Sunset, came out, which completely knocked me out. And I'll probably do one on that movie at some point. If you were going to pair this movie, I always want to have a double feature option. I would say David Lean's Brief Encounter, 1945. It's also a movie about two people that meet, well, by a train station, actually. And the way that you can just like bond with someone really quickly, and everybody else around you doesn't even know that this like momentous thing is happening. And then hard choices that you have to make, because they're like fully adults in that movie with responsibilities already, unlike the two in Before Sunrise. So it'd be kind of an interesting pairing of what if two people met in this kind of way, but they were adults and married and with different kinds of stages of life. So anyways, Brief Encounter is like 5-star. Like it's totally incredible. I do want to say something about the nature of film criticism. I'm not a film critic. I'm a film lover. But you talk about movies, you're automatically critical. That doesn't have to mean negative. You're thinking critically, and even thinking critically about your own emotions and your responses to a film. And so I've come to really believe that film criticism and film appreciation and film discourse really should come down to two primary things that are very different from each other. And one is just like the craft of cinema and filmmaking. And if you watch a lot of movies, or are educated or have made movies or whatever, you get a sense of like craft, and and that's easier to be more like objective about. And usually the movies that we have those big, massive arguments with a friend about, like I've had, I could name a few, but I won't right now. Um, it's usually not about the craft. It's usually about I wouldn't even say the story. I would say more like vibes of the movie. And so I think that so film criticism to me is about two things. On the one hand, yes, it's about the ability to acknowledge craft and be able to tell the difference between the craft of a movie like, say, Fellini's 8.5 and some CGI green screen, basically animated comic book movie, right? You should be able to tell the difference, significant difference between those things, to the point where I would say they're not even the same medium. Anyways, so film criticism, yes, it's about craft, and then it's about what Freud calls wish fulfillment. And for Freud and dreams, the unconscious bubbles up and we experience wish fulfillment, even if it's anxiety or guilt or fear, but it's in our dreams. Um, and this is something that is helps give us catharsis and release. And so wish fulfillment in a film, because like, by the way, David Lynch, this the book, which I highly recommend this book, Room to Dream. Um, Lynch is someone who believes in dreams. So is Richard Linklater, by the way, if you've seen Making Life. And if movies are dreams, and if you take Freud at all seriously, then that would mean that movies are have a wish fulfillment aspect. Of course they do, because movies take us places that we've never been, and movies are also time travel. They take us to times. We can go right now. You could go on Criterion Channel probably, or get the Blu-ray or whatever of a movie like Brief Encounter from 1945, and it'll look gorgeous and pristine, and you have now time traveled. You're there with those people. This is a miracle, right? Cinema is a miracle in this way. But the wish fulfillment aspect is simply, do I want to be in this world with these people? That is subjective. There's nothing objective about that. If you put on Before Sunrise and you're like, I don't like this character or this character, I mean it's hard for me to imagine someone just being like, I can't stand these people, or I don't want to be on a train and going to Vienna or walking around Vienna. But to each their own. But why do people love like a horror film? Why have I seen Mulholland Drive like 50 times when it's absolutely the scariest thing, scarier than Hellraiser, Solo, or whatever? Like, there's something comforting and cathartic about like a David Lynch movie. So this wish fulfillment aspect means, like, for example, here's an example. I have a real hard time connecting with like folk horror movies, where usually everything is kind of faded. Like, there's like fate has some part in it, and that the characters all, whoever the main character is probably going to die and be sacrificed or something. Or something like that. And I find those movies, I just like immediately like, I don't want to be here in this world where like I don't feel like I have freedom or agency, where everything's faded, where we've entered into some pre-modern pagan era of like sacrifices to the god and all this kind of stuff. I just so I'll watch. I've seen lots of folk horror movies. I almost never enjoy them very much. I can appreciate them though based on the craft part. So I think it's important when we talk about movies to acknowledge these two aspects. In other words, there's the objective part, that's the craft part, where we can talk specifically about what camera lens is being used, or film stock, or the script, the writing, the acting. These things, we have ways of measuring these standards, like objective standards. But then when it comes to like, am I into this? Am I vibing with this or not? That is personal and subjective. So that's just a little note on how I'm going to be doing discourse on these videos. Is There's the craft, and then there's the wish fulfillment. Do I want to be in this world? And if I do want to be in this world, why? It's easy in a movie like Before Sunrise to know why I want to be walking around Vienna, Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy, like as if I'm like a ghost there, like just listening and observing them. Of course, that sounds fantastic, right? But it makes less sense. Why would I want to be in Camp Crystal Lake, where there's a killer on the loose, getting rid of teenagers? Because it's fun, but it's not fun for everybody. All right. Part of the reason why Richard Linklater cast Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy was because he knew that it was a pretty loose script and that they were really going to have to bring a lot to it. And the fact that they were both writers and he knew they had the ability to write is part of why he chose them, which, by the way, just sounds like good advice. If you're working on a project and you need something extra from your actors, pick actors that are writers. That makes sense. The Before Sunrise and the Before movies in general are all about, of course, they're about romance. They're about projection. They're about like how we project onto others. For example, at the beginning of Before Sunrise, they're on this train separately. They're both like reading books, and there's this couple, like a middle-aged couple, that's like arguing in French or German, I think. Anyways, they're arguing, and there's no subtitles, so if you don't speak German, you don't know what they're saying. And Julie Delpy's character, actually gets up to leave, and that's what leads her to sitting next to Ethan Hawke, who then starts talking to her. But we get this. It's not an accident that it starts with a middle-aged couple fighting, because this is a movie about young love, romance when you're young, and specifically free. It's like they're just on the train, kind of just rambling around, reading their books, looking out the window, thinking, imagining. They don't have anywhere to be really at that moment. And so you get the picture of freedom that they have, but you also are reminded that something coming for us, and are we going to be like them? Because they don't want to be like them, the couple who's bitter at each other, angry and resentful. Because what do we do with all the people in our lives? Like, we project onto them, even when we don't mean to, and especially if we're not in touch with our unconscious stuff. Because then it's even easier to be like a puppet, of the unconscious that's just like putting things onto people and you didn't even like realize it. And we do this certainly with our loved ones. I mean, why is it that so many of, like, when there's violence in the world, it's through a family member? We hurt the ones that are around us. We fall in love with the people that are around us. We grow resentful towards people around us, and we all have to watch this and be careful about it. And so the movie right away already knows this. Like, and the fact that Linklater was as young as he was, and Delpy and Hawke, like, how did they have like kind of like wisdom that's in here? I don't know. I don't know how to. It's impressive. But yeah, youth, possibility, romantic love. And so what ended up happening is they start talking, and then Ethan Hawke says, listen, I have a flight at 6 a.m. I was just going to like walk around Vienna tonight. I don't have enough money for a hotel. Why don't you just get off the train with me? And we'll just like walk around Vienna, and I really like talking to you. And she decides to do it. And it's one of those things where you totally place yourself there. Oh, would I do that? Would I ask someone to get off the train with me, or would I get off the train with somebody if I was connecting with them like that? And my instinct is yes, I would. You bet I would. I would hope to be the kind of person that would be brave enough to ask someone to do that, and brave enough and bold enough to say yes to somebody like that, So, and right away, as soon as they get off the train, they're like getting into these awkward silences where they realize, like, okay, here we are. We just like made this decision, and now what? And then but the whole movie basically just follows them around Vienna, just walking. It's probably a steady cam. And it's just like super smooth. It's not handheld and like jarring. It's more like you're floating along. Like, it does feel kind of like as if we're like a spirit, a ghost, just observing and listening. And movies are great at this, giving us this feeling of being there. Kind of like when you're in a dream, and oftentimes in a dream, it almost feels like you're just seeing everything happen. You're not even really participating. That's what movies are like, 100%. Um, you see really quickly here that Ethan Hawke's character is quite insecure about his masculinity, his being like an ignorant American, his sexual prowess. Um, Watching it now a little bit, you do kind of wonder, like, would she get off the train with this guy? Like, would she really? She seems like more mature than him. Uh, and would she be going out with a guy who's like 10 or 15 years older than her, like a professor or something? I know, but regardless, these two completely are, believable together, and they're different enough and have similar interests. Like he's a writer, he's more of an artist, she's more of an activist, but in that meeting place of ideas and politics and philosophy and art, um, so many exciting conversations. And quite a few. There's a few people in my life that are more politically action motivated than internally or artistically. And having a balance, people like that in your life is, I think, really important. If you're only around inward people all the time, that's not going to work. But if you're only around activists that never know how to, if you're only around people of action who are busy all the time and don't really know how to be inward and be introspective, you need both, in your community. There's a really special moment in this movie that I think maybe is kind of the iconic scene, and that's when they go to a record store and they're just like noodling around, and there's a listening booth, and they take a record by, I believe the artist is Kath Bloom. The song is "Come Here," and it's a very beautiful song, and it's the kind of song that breaks down any like barriers that you have, like her voice. Talk about earnest. But they go and they're listening to the song. It's also cool because they're in Vienna, but like it's really an artist from like probably Texas or Oklahoma or something. You can just tell. And Linklater's from Texas in real life. And it's cool to like be hearing this song, but like in Vienna with an American and a French woman. And they do this thing that I think is kind of the symbolic image of these films, because come back to it in all three. And that's there, the music starts playing, and immediately it's just like calling out for them to just hold each other, kiss, but they barely know each other, it's kind of awkward. And so they're standing next to each other, and he kind of like look over at her, but she'll be looking over here, and then he'll look over here, and then she looks towards him, but like they keep like just missing, Now there's a scene a little bit later in a gondola or whatever, where they look at each other and they kiss, and it's quite lovely. But you get this thing in a lot of in these films where this image of looking and missing the look, and then the other person looking and missing the look, but then there are these moments when you match the look. And by the way, there's another beautiful part in the movie when Julie Delpy and Ethan Hawke are talking about like spirituality and like God and love and stuff. And Julie Delpy says, "No, if there is a God, I don't think that God's in me or in you, but in that space between where we like try to communicate and connect with each other." I mean, that's the kind of thing. When I saw this movie for the first time, a period when I was quite like more traditionally religious, um, still I was like, yes, yeah, the God that I'm interested in is absolutely the God in the space where the attempt at communication and connection happens. I also happen to be a talker, someone who loves discourse and conversation, but really I only like to talk about a few things, and it's like the big stuff, like the arts, philosophy, religion, politics, and I have no interest in anything else. That's it. That's like all I'm interested in. I don't care about. I'm a bartender, and I listen to people talk all the time, and 99% of the things that people are talking about, I have no interest in. But like the stuff that Linklater is interested in, I am interested in, and so his movies for me are, just like lovely. And here we get to this, what I think kind of is at the core of these films, which is the relationship between freedom and responsibility. Freedom, depending on how you look at it, either gives you hope or like things that could be coming, good things in the future, or fear and anxiety that bad things are coming in the future. Freedom, Kierkegaard says, anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. Everybody talks about freedom and how great freedom is. There's that speech in Easy Rider, also a shelf, when Jack Nicholson tells Dennis Hopper that when they look at you, you represent freedom. And Dennis Hopper says, well, yeah, what's wrong with that? That's what it's all about, man, freedom. And he goes, yeah, well, people say they want freedom, but when they see it, they're scared of it. And the way that we use the word freedom, especially in the United States, where it's like freedom always means like something automatically positive and good. Of course, freedom is good. But if you think that freedom think about a day where, okay, we're all busy, right? So you wake up one day and like your meetings get canceled or something, or you have a day where you really don't have anything to do, and maybe the people in your life are busy. And like a lot of people get anxious, like, oh, what am I going to do today? Like, and that's just like a kind of a goofy example. But when you're in your late teens and early 20s, hopefully you're not already like stuck, in responsibilities. Hopefully you're at a time where you're curious and you're wondering, but you know that those things are coming, unless you're a very certain specific type of person who is going to opt out of these things and live off the grid, or join a commune or whatever. But even then, you still have responsibilities. There's no way of getting out of responsibility. So on the one hand, there's the excitement when you're a teenager, early 20s, of like everything is possible. But the other side of excitement is anxiety and fear. And the way we deal with that is determines a lot of like how well our lives go, at least internally, especially. So on the one hand, there's freedom, but freedom exists so that one can make choices. And when one makes a choice, one takes on responsibility. That's the way it is. If you want to be totally free and free from responsibility, you're going to be like the Russian kid in Anora, where you destroy everything around you because of your freedom. Freedom to do what is the question. And I always think, what are we free for? We're free to love, and we're free to make commitments to people, to make commitments to causes like activism, and to make commitments like to make art or whatever. We have relational commitments, we have commitment in the world, and then we have commitments that are like towards ourself, which you could also say towards the spiritual life, which is largely interior, or at least experienced that way. And so these movies seem to understand the excitement and the fear, the excitement and the anxiety that comes with freedom, which includes the hope for responsibility that leads to a sense of fulfillment and meaning, and not the kind of responsibility that leads me to feel like I'm trapped in prison. What did I do with my life? Like the Talking Heads song. This is not my beautiful house. What happened? What life am I in here? The song, actually, Once in a Lifetime, is kind of a description of if things go bad, where you end up. So, and there's another wish fulfillment aspect, by the way, here. Watching a movie like Before Sunrise, which is there's no cell phones. There's no cell phones. There's no internet. It's very. I'm not a nostalgic person. I said before. However, I am nostalgia for a time without these things that I'm currently using, because I am old enough to. When I was in high school, we didn't have phones yet, and the internet was barely getting started. And in fact, the first thing I ever used the internet for was RogerEbert.com. Roger Ebert put all of his reviews up so you could read all of them. And I literally read like all of them, and it was amazing. Roger Ebert, not a beautiful person. Talk about losing somebody like losing Ebert. That was horrible. So, anyways, the wish there's so much wish fulfillment stuff in this movie because it's wonderful to spend time with Ethan Hawke, Julie Delpy, and kind of laugh at and with them. Because again, there's some insecurity there's parts where you're laughing at them. Because come on, we were all pretty pompous probably at certain points of our younger life, you know. But then the wish fulfillment of just like walking around a Vienna that I'm sure looks quite different now. Although I do know they do a better job of preserving places over there. And but also the wish fulfillment of a time, yeah, without cell phones, where you could devote like all your attention to one person, like for a whole night like that. Never look down at a phone, right? And in fact, there is a phone sequence in the movie where they role play. What are you going to say? What are you going to tell your best friend when you get home about tonight? And so he like calls his roommate or something, but like they're fake, you know, they're just acting. And then the other one will play the other character. And it's when they're all doing this play game that they actually like start to tell each other like how they feel about what's happening. And it reminds me of Bob Dylan in the movie The Rolling Thunder Review. He talks about how on the Rolling Thunder Review tour that they all wore lots of masks. And he says, we should have worn even more masks. And that when somebody wears a mask, you know they're going to tell the truth. And if they're not wearing a mask, well, you can't be too sure. And this idea of like role playing and play acting is another thing that's going to come across in these movies. And I think that it's that something true, which is movies. Relationships they require narratives, you know, they require stories that in partially that we make up. They part of our stories are a fiction in a way, and there's nothing wrong with that. We all play roles for each other, anyways. We all do that with everybody, you know. We do it at work, we do it with our friends, with our family. It's just a matter of how much authenticity can we bring to that role that I'm playing. Because oftentimes when you're acting, you're actually might be being more truthful than we are when we think that we're not acting, because we're always acting anyways, to some degree. There's also something else that's kind of painful about this movie when you watch it when older. It's not just that you remember like the freedom of that age, and you should also absolutely remember the misery and the anxiety and the struggle, right? Because for a lot of people, the early 20s is like the worst part of your whole life. I know quite a few people that's their worst period, most difficult psychologically, emotionally, right? So it's not like being 17 to 25 is just like, oh, it's the greatest years of your life. No, but they are very particular. Usually what people mean, they're talking about that freedom that gets chipped away at as you take on more and more responsibility. And these movies will deal with that, with those realities. And yeah, so there's, I think, and another painful thing in the movie is this idea that when you're young and thinking that you might like have like a lot of nights like that, like these two have on this one night, and then facing the reality of actually it can be hard to find people that you really connect with, which is why when you do meet someone, and it doesn't, not just romantically, friendship, whatever, when you do meet those special people, you have to make sure and nurture those relationships and keep them and don't let them go, because friendships are the most important part of our lives. And when I say friendship, I include everything: romance, parental, familial, friend, peers, coworkers, everything. Like friendship is the most important. I would say after that, creative art, you know. But yeah, so this movie captures the naivete of youth, but from quite thoughtful, intelligent young people. Certainly, I don't think I was articulating the way these two were when I was 22 or whatever. I wish. So, The Before Sunrise is a movie that confronts like realities of time. It's absolutely about time. And if you know anything about Richard Linklater, his movies tend to have a big focus on time. Look at Boyhood, which was filmed over the course of 12 years. These movies are are filmed over the course of just under 30 years, and where you can see time on the faces and the bodies of the characters. Um, what a miracle that is! And in this case, time, because they're running out of time. They don't have that much. The realities of like space, location, they're going to be very far away from each other very soon. The realities of like possibility, good and bad, limitations. They don't have all the money in the world. Even though they don't have that many commitments, they do. He's got to go back to the States. She's got to go back to Paris. They got school. They got their things. So there are real limitations. I mean, one of the reasons why he asked her to hang out all night because he doesn't have enough money for a hotel, right? So they have all this freedom, but there's always limitations. And this is a movie that reminds us that courage is necessary, like the courage to make a connection with another, both the courage to initiate and the courage to say yes, if we think it's worth it, right? So those are some thoughts about Before Sunrise, and you could go on and on. It's such a special film. It's aged wonderfully. Before Sunset and Before Midnight only deepen the power of this one, and I'm just so grateful that we've got Richard Linklater, and again, RIP to David Lynch, one of the best to ever do it. More importantly than that is what a beautiful person, and what an inspiration. So go on YouTube and watch videos of David Lynch talking about the art life and talking about keep your eye on the donut and not the hole. And also go on, if you're not going to rewatch Before Sunrise, just go on YouTube and watch the scene when they listen to Come Here in the record store booth. So thank you all for being here. I'll be back with more of these in the near future. Each one's just going to be about one movie. If you want to hear other stuff I've done, you can go to the Trace look up Trace Podcast, where I've done all kinds of interviews with filmmakers and musicians, artists and philosophers. And then also I write fiction. And I would have never written fiction without David Lynch, by the way, and maybe without Linklater, actually, too, because he showed me a different way of doing dialogue and everything. But if you want to hear any of my fiction, I have audio stories, and they're at andrewhackett.bandcamp.com. Most recently, The Woman on the Bridge, which is a novel, kind of a thriller romance story. So I'll be back soon. Long live the cinema, long live David Lynch, and long live the Before trilogy.